Welcome to the Inverse Happy Hour. I'm Annalee Newitz, and I'm going to be reading to you from my latest book, The Future of Another Timeline. It's about a group of time travelers who are trying to change the past, and it's sort of about feeling like you're in the wrong timeline, which I think a lot of us can relate to right now. I'm actually reading to you from the book I took with me on tour, which is considerably more battered and has an I voted sticker on it. You should all vote. So this is from the first chapter, and it introduces you to one of the main characters and her unusual mission and the unusual bad guys that she's facing. Drums beat in the distance like an amplified pulse. People streamed over the dirt road, leather boots laced to their knees, eyes ringed in coal, ears and lips studded with precious metals. Some gathered in an open square below the steep path to the amphitheater, making a bonfire out of objects stolen from their enemies. The smoke reeked of something ancient and horrific. Materials far older than humanity were burning. A rusty sunset painted everyone in blood, and shrieks around the flames mixed with faraway chanting. It could have been Rome under Nero. It could have been Samarkand when the Sogdians fled. It could have been Ataturk's new Istanbul or a feast day in Chaco Canyon. The technologies were industrial, Neolithic, and medieval. The screams were geochronologically neutral. I paused, smelling the toxins, watching a woman with jet black lips and blue hair pretend to eat a spider. One of her companions laughed. "Michelle, you are so gross. This isn't an Ozzy concert." They paused at the ticket booths to flip off the Vice Fighters, a gang of conservative protesters waving signs covered in Bible quotes. Some of them were burning CDs in a garbage can, and the stench of melting plastic formed a noxious bubble around their demonstration. By the way, if you can hear a chainsaw in the background, that's my neighbors, because even during pandemic, we need chainsaw sounds, and that is just how it's going to be here. The machine had not delivered me to an ancient war, nor to an anti-imperialist celebration. I was at Irvine Meadows Amphitheater in 1992, deep in the heart of Orange County, Alta, California. Soon, I'd be seeing one of the greatest punk bands of the decade. But I wasn't here for the history tourism. Somewhere in this rowdy concert crowd, a dangerous conspiracy was unfolding. I needed to find out who was behind it, because if these bastards succeeded, they would destroy time travel, locking us into one version of history forever. I bought a lawn seat and raced up the winding pedestrian walkway to the seating area, lurid with stadium lights. Grape Ape's lead singer, Glorious Garcia, strutted out on stage alone, sequins on her tattered skirt shimmering in the glare. She let out a furious howl. "Hola, bitches! If anyone called you a slut today, say it with me! Slut! Slut! Slut!" All around me, women joined the chant. They wore battered combat boots, shredded jeans, and wrecked dresses. They had tattoos and black nail polish and looked like warrior queens from another planet. Tangled hair flashed in every possible color. "You sluts are beautiful!" Glorious fisted the air and aimed her mic at the crowd, still chanting, "Slut! Slut! Slut!" Okay, everybody at home, join in. Let's all say it together. Slut! 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 Back when I went to this concert for the first time, I was an angry 16-year-old with too many piercings for suburbia, wearing a military jacket over a 1950s dress. Now, I was 47 on the books, and 55 if you count travel time. Then I felt a broad hand on my upper arm, squeezing a little too hard, and a large male body pressed against my back. I tried to elbow him and wiggle away, but the still invisible stranger held me in place. He leaned down to whisper yell in my ear, blotting out the music. "I know you must have had many daughters at your age. and you're worried about their future. His voice was smooth, and his warm breath smelled like lavender and mint. With his free hand, he started massaging my neck as he continued to grip my arm. That's why you come to places like this, to find a better way for women. We want that too. Maybe you'll look past your prejudice against men and read our zine. At last he released me, and I whirled to face him. He pulled his zine from a crumpled Kinko's bag. Grainy Xeroxed images of women in chains adorned the cover, and letters torn from magazines spelled out the title, College is a Lie. Flipping through the pages of 10-point Courier font and smeary cartoons, I scanned a few typical punk rants against suburban brainwashing. College teaches conformity, turns you into a corporate drone, destroys true art, blah, blah, blah. But there was a weird strand of gender politics in it. Over and over, the anonymous authors preached that college destroys feminine freedoms inherited from our ancestors on the plains of Africa and is anti-uterus. The entire zine was about why women should drop out of college. I looked sharply at the man, a nasty retort on my tongue, but his face stole my words. It couldn't be. I would never forget those features, so perfectly formed it was as if he'd been grown in a vat full of men's magazines. I'd last seen him in 1880 at a lecture on suppressing vice in New York City. He was one of the young men clustered around Anthony Comstock, lapping up the famous moral crusader's invective about the evils of birth control and abortion. Later, at the protest, he'd given me a beautiful smile before punching me in the chest. Gasping for air, I dismissed him as one of the many YMCA boys under Comstock's spell back then. Now it appeared he was something more, a traveler.
So if you're here, that was a great reading from Annalee Newitz of The Future of Another Timeline. Now we're going to open up the comments. If anyone has any questions or thoughts, this is your chance. You got a lot of emojis with hearts, so that's a good sign.
That's exciting. You know, and if it gets slow, you can meet my cat Space, who's like sleeping over in the corner.
Oh, I like that. Maybe we can add a segment to this where we just show each other our pets.
I mean, that's what I've been doing. Every Zoom call that I've had pretty much started with like, everyone shows their pets. Mm-hmm. It's just part of the way.
So I have to ask, I think, how, obviously this is a book about time travel, so it's fictional, but how autobiographical is the story about this 16-year-old girl who goes to the punk concert? Is that you?
You know, I wish I had been that cool, but when I was in high school, I was really into computer hacking and heavy metal and only pretty much hung out with guys. So I didn't have any cool punk rock girlfriends. I did get really into Riot Girl music when I was in college, and so I did have some of those experiences when I was young. But when I was in high school, I did grow up in Irvine, so all of the stuff in the book that's set in Irvine, California is extremely accurate, except for the part where the character murders a bunch of people. My friends and I did not murder anyone, as far as you know. We did break into some machines, but we didn't actually murder anybody.
Cool. You mentioned the idea of an alternate timeline, which of course I think we all think about a lot these days.
Yeah.
Is there any, let's say you had a time machine, and you could change one thing, what would you go back to fix this? I don't know, to make things a little better.
You know, I mean, in fact, I mean, this book is kind of about some of my fantasies about fixing the timeline. And in this book, what happens is time travel is really mundane. Like, everyone has it. It's been around forever. And it's actually this kind of weird phenomenon that's kind of part of these rock formations on Earth that people figure out how to use. And so they have edit wars over history. So there's like bad guys who are trying to revert history to like, you know, kind of a darker version, what we would consider a darker version. And then my characters who are fighting to make history better for women and trans people and like, nerds. And so they're all scientists. So I think, so a big part of this book is about going back to the 19th century and trying to fight for women's rights at that time, which I think a lot of people don't realize that in the 19th century in the United States, there was a very strong women's movement that did involve fighting for abortion rights and fighting for sexual freedom. And so what the characters do is they go back and try to help women get access to abortion. And the way they do it seems really strange, but works out in the book. They do it by meeting up with some belly dancers who actually managed to change the laws. And this is actually all based on true history. There was, at the World's Fair in Chicago in the 1890s, there was a huge scandal over the belly dancers who were performing there, and whether or not they should be allowed to engage in such terrible acts of promiscuity. And the outcome of that legal proceeding actually did wind up affecting women's access to things like birth control. And so anyway, you'll find out more about it. So I think, that's my cat trying to destroy something in the corner. I'm not actually sure what she's doing. Anyway, it's a new thing that she's doing. But so yeah, also I would go back and change history so that my cat was a little nicer, I guess.
Who wouldn't?
Do that.
We do have a question from the audience. Before I ask it, just a reminder, if you're watching, this is Inverse Happy Hour, and we're taking questions with Annalee Newitz, a great sci-fi author. I can't see the cat.
Talking to the cat. There's my cat.
Canada loves Annalee. That's nice. Oh, there's the cat.
Here's Space Cat.
Hey, cat. So the question is, if you could another time travel question, would you go back or forward?
Well, in my book, people can only go back, although there's some hints that maybe they could go forward, but they haven't figured it out quite yet. So if I could go, so I would prefer to go back in time. I don't know, going to the future seems really weird. And so I really want to go back and visit this ancient indigenous American city called Cahokia, which is right outside of St. Louis. It's across the river from St. Louis in East St. Louis in a town called Collinsville. And it was this incredible, huge city about 1,000 years ago. It had massive earthen pyramids, huge farms, incredibly advanced, city. And no one really knows that much about who lived there and what they believed and what happened to them. So I'd really like to go back there and just see it for myself. And, obviously I don't speak the language that they spoke. And I'd kind of stand out as like a white chick, but like I'd do what I could, I'd be like, hey, like, help me out here. I'm just trying to hang out. The thing about Cahokia is that they really love to party and do drugs and have barbecues. So I feel like I'd fit in pretty well.
Sounds like
except
fun.
for eat some barbecued deer. Be so good.
It does sound good. More broadly, what do you think science fiction can offer, especially at a time like this when we're all, a little scared, a little uncertain? What's the power of sci-fi?
I mean, I think the thing that's great about science fiction is that it allows us to escape from the immediate moment and kind of see things in perspective. And so I've been thinking a lot about science fiction by people like Ian M. Banks or N.K. Jemisin that deal with these big, long stretches of history and kind of reminding us that, we are just in this one moment in time and things are going to continue to change and evolve, and we're not going to history isn't going to end. It's going to keep going. And I think, that's a big power of science fiction. And also science fiction is great for problem solving. It's really a good place to try out ideas for how to fix really big problems like pandemics or climate change, and, try out, does this idea seem like it would work? Oh, actually, no, this idea would lead to horrific nationalism. Okay, let's try another idea. And I think that's another fantastic way to use it.
Nice. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. One more question. I won't keep you too long. What's a recent sci-fi book or movie or show that you've enjoyed that you'd recommend to people right now?
So I just finished watching the Netflix show I Am Not Okay With This.
Oh, I love it.
which was so great. And then, which is about a young woman who's developing superpowers in high school and can't figure out what the hell is going on. It's incredible, very well written and acted. The other thing I'd recommend is a new book that just came out called Docile by Kellen Sparra and K.M. Sparra. And he's written this fantastic near future book about how people are so deeply in debt in the United States that they start basically becoming indentured, and people are doing things like inheriting their grandparents' college debt. Like, it's so bad that like when you're born with like the debt of your parents and your grandparents. And so there's a company that invents a drug called Docilium that you can take during your indenture so that you kind of don't really remember it, and you kind of feel okay about it, even though when you're indentured, your owner can do anything with you. And it's this incredible story about the one guy who decides not to take Docilium and what happens to him. And it just feels very real because so many of us are dealing with debt right now. And yet it's also this great escapist story. It has elements of romance, although it's really screwed up romance, FYI, trigger warning. But it has like a lot of great sex and a lot of great thoughts and a lot of great action. And, you know, I can't recommend it enough. It's just such an amazing novel. So Docile and the TV show, I Am Not Okay With This, that'll, I think, get you through a weekend for sure.
Great. Yeah, I got to check out that book. That sounds really intense. Well,
it's so good.
Be a nice person. Someone as to I am, I think. So anyway, thanks for joining us on Inverse Happy Hour. I hope you had a great time. This is a lot of fun.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. You mentioned the book you're working on next. Do you want to give us a tease what it's about, or is it a little too far out? Up to you if you want to give yourself a little promotion.
It's not going to be out. Yeah, it's not going to be out for a while. Actually, my next book that's coming out is a science book. It's nonfiction. It's called 4 Lost Cities. It'll be out early next year, and it's about archaeologists trying to understand why people abandoned 4 ancient cities that were incredibly important, incredibly huge cities, one of which is Cahokia, which I mentioned before. So look out for that. It's called 4 Lost Cities. And I also do a podcast called Our Opinions Are Correct with Charlie Jane Anders, and that's every 2 weeks. And so if you want to hear me babbling with Charlie about science fiction, it's a show about science fiction and society.
Sounds great. Well, again, thank you so much, Annalee. I hope you had fun. And
yeah, you too.
Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. See you on Thursday. Bye.
Bye now.